Okay, let's make a start then. If you have a look at your test papers in front of you, you've done 2 exam questions there, all right? One's out of 6 and one's out of 13, okay? Now, if you look on the screen, we've got some examples of marks. You've got your own marks in front of you. Let's suppose you got 3 marks for the first one and you got 7 marks for the second one, okay? Let's suppose you rushed home immediately and said, well, I've done far better on the second question. Why isn't that right? If you got 3 marks on the first question and 7 marks on the second question, why are you wrong in saying, well, I've got 7, 7's bigger than 3, I've got a higher mark on the second one. What's wrong with that? That's it. They're both out of different amounts, all right? If you look at the 2 questions that we did, the first question was out of 6, okay? The second question was out of 13, all right? What technique do we have in maths to deal with that? I notice some of you have already written them on the front of your papers. Percentage, isn't it? All right? If you've got a question out of 6, question out of 13, the raw marks won't do you any good because they're out of different amounts, okay? So one thing you can do, which I've not done, is to work out the percentages. You can say 3 out of 6, that's 50%, okay? 7 out of 13, that's a bit more than 50%. So 7 out of 13 is a bit better, it's 50-something%, and that's a bit higher, but not by very much, okay? So we know what raw marks mean, we know what percentages mean, but there's still a big problem, all right? There's still a problem with looking at those numbers and just saying, oh, I did a bit better on the second one and not so bad on the first one. What's the other variable, if you like? Let's talk in scientist language. What's the other variable that we've not really accounted for? What if the first question was really, really difficult? So you got 3 out of 6 on the first question, but the first question was an absolute stinker, all right? It was really difficult. The highest mark in the year was 4, and you've got 3. That is a superb mark. You've done really well. 7 out of 13 on the second one. Let's suppose the average for the whole class was 10. 7 out of 13, but it's a higher percentage, it's 50-something%. Doesn't matter. 7 out of 13 when the average is 10, that's not so good, all right? So can you see that something we often miss out when we analyse marks? We deal with the fact they're out of different numbers using percentages, but there's a big, big important factor we need to factor in, which is how difficult they are, all right? Now, you can't know that. So if you've got your marks written on the front of your paper and you're thinking, I've got a view now as to how well I did, then you're literally just doing half the problem, all right? You need to factor in how difficult those questions were, and you don't know, all right? Using grade boundaries is a very bad idea. There's a much better system, okay? But it involves you looking at how other people did. You can't sit there looking at your 3 out of 6 and thinking, it's not very good. You don't know. Round the room, that could be the highest mark in the class. Round the room, that could be the lowest mark in the class, okay? And that's why what we're going to use to analyse our marks for GCSE is a system I call delta scores, all right? What I'm going to ask you to do in a moment is to write down the delta score for your marks, okay? Now, if you're thinking this sounds like advanced mathematics, well, it is. But the good news is the spreadsheet on the computer there has done all the work for you, and all you've got to do is write down 2 numbers. But those 2 numbers, your 2 delta scores, will tell you how well you've done. It will show you which question is an area that you've actually seriously messed up on and you need to sort out. It'll show you which areas you've done really well on. Do not be sat there thinking, I got 80%, so I've done really well. That's a very bad idea indeed, all right? Because actually, 80% may not be much above average, all right? So, if you have a look on the screen, then you can see an example, all right? This is my mark book, my spreadsheet that I use for analysing marks, and you've only done 2 test questions so far, both on specific heat capacity. There's the first one out of 6, there's the second one out of 13, okay? I've taken the marks away, I've taken the names away, I beg your pardon, to protect the innocent, as they say. But down the right-hand side here, next to each one, can you see the delta scores, all right? They've got a posh scientific name, mathematical name, but I call them that to keep it simple, okay? Right, so let's have a look at these scores, and you can see some of them are happy numbers because they're in blue. They're numbers like 1 and 1.7. They're obviously good numbers, and there are some grumpy numbers you can see here, minus 1.1, minus 2 point something. These are not good numbers. And if you look at the red boxes, they clearly line up with people who haven't done very well. The blue boxes line up with people who've done quite well, okay? And again, you're big people now. I'm not trying to have a go at people, this, that and the other, but if SHC, specific heat capacity, which is what these questions were on, if specific heat capacity is a topic that's going to cause you bother in the exam, you need to know about it now, and you need to realise, actually, I got 3 out of 6, but that was actually a really bad mark, and I need to work quite hard on that topic. That's why I'm doing this, okay? Not doing it to embarrass you or upset you or anything like that, but if you've done a question on something, I often think of an exam like going to the dentist where he pokes at each of your teeth. If you've got a wobbly tooth on specific heat capacity, it's no good waiting till the summer of 2017 to find out. We need to find out about it now, all right? And that's the reason for using this system, okay? Now, if you're thinking, I can't do advanced mathematics, it's all very difficult, and my head hurts, let me explain it to you very simply. There we are. If you're thinking, I don't like advanced mathematics, well, who does? But the delta system does it really simply. What it does is it doesn't tell you what your mark is, it tells you how your mark features on this particular curve, okay? So, if you were looking earlier on, you might have seen here's a delta score of 1. All right, this person's got quite a high mark by the look of it, although we can't be sure. And they've got a delta score of 1. Well, you can see a delta score of 1 is about there. All right. And that takes account of what the question was out of. And it takes account of how difficult the question was. If you got a delta score of 1, then you have done quite well. All right. And you may get a delta score of 1 with quite a low score sometimes. If the question's really difficult, can you see the average might be, I don't know, say 2 out of 6. It was a really hard question. The 0, which is obviously the average, well, mathematicians are going to tell me actually it's not the mean, is it? Someone said it. It's the mode. Yes, it's the mark which the highest number of people got. But can you see if let's think of a really difficult test out of 6, the mode, or the mean, usually about the same thing, going to be 2. You might get, say, a delta score of 1 by only getting 3. So you might have looked at your paper and thought 3 out of 6, not very good. But actually when we work out your delta score, that's 1. And you say, God, I've done quite well there. Those marks I got, most people didn't. I'm doing slightly well compared to the rest of the class. It gives you an idea of how you're actually doing in reality. Okay? If you've got a delta score of minus 1.5, then that is a bad score. All right? Minus 1.5, I need to let you know really clearly that you've done badly on that, because when that topic comes up again, it may well be the real thing, all right? So minus 1.5, you can see, is a bad score. You might get minus 1.5 with a high number. You may have got 60% and be thinking, well, that's not too bad, tricky topic. But actually, it wasn't. And the rest of the class were averaging 75, and your delta score of minus 1.5 means that's an area, think of the wobbly teeth again, we found there a topic which you've not done well on, all right? I know me finding out things you can't do doesn't sound very friendly, but it's really important. We're here to prepare for a public exam that's going to affect the rest of your life, okay? And you need to be clear as crystal as to how well you've done, and as I say, you do the question, you get a mark out of 6, you put it in your book and forget about it, you've only done half the story. You need to know what I call the delta score. Where does it feature on this curve? Can you just say, yeah, aren't I clever? I've totally nailed that one, brilliant. Or actually, oh, don't know. And the actual mark, the mark out of 6, the mark out of 13, won't do that for you. You don't know. So don't be sat there feeling fantastic with 11 out of 13. And don't be sat there feeling glum with 1 out of 6, although I think in this case you're well entitled to, because it might not be like that. All right? And you don't know until I've taken everybody's marks in. This is the hard work behind the scenes, a bit like the film clip we saw earlier. This is the hard work behind the scenes. I have to sit and type all the wretched numbers in, but then what I've got here is the delta scores for your marks. So that's how the delta system works. It basically puts your marks onto this curve so you can see how well you've done, full stop, not how well you think you've done. This shows you, compared to the difficulty of the question, how well you really have done, okay? And if you're preparing for an important exam, that's what you need from each test, to know in reality how well have you done, how badly have you done. Let's go to the first question out of 6. Get your pens ready. Here's the first question out of 6. If you got 6, somebody must have done. If you got 6, can you put 1.7 next to it? 6 out of 6 is a delta score of 1.7. Think of the curve. That's a cracking result. Well done. Okay. If you got 3, That's a delta score of minus 0.4. If you got 3 out of 6, thought, ooh, ho-hum, half marks. Well, really, that's a bit off. I'm being a bit horrible to you because these are higher tier GCSE questions. It's only week 3. Accept that. But you are going to need to get higher marks than the real thing. So 3 out of 6 on this one. We might do a test next week that's harder and it'll be a different story. But 3 on the first question out of 6, can you put down minus 0.4? Okay? You don't need to show it to your parent, don't show it to anybody else, but you need to know that you need, look back at that question. Were there a couple of easy marks that you didn't get, which you'd get for the future? Okay? The 5's not bad, delta score of 1. That's a good result, well done. Okay, so put a happy 1 next to it. Okay, lots of 3s. If you've got 2, that's minus 1.1. That is a bad mark, all right? And I know it's a difficult question, I know it's GCSE work, I know it's only week 3, we know all that, but at the end of the day, that's not good enough, okay? I'm not going to come round and, phone your parents up about it, but you need to write that number down, okay? Next to, if you've got 2, you need to write a delta score of minus 1.1. You need to know that that isn't a very good mark.